And welcome into the Four Verticals Podcast, episode 164 for this February 19th, 2026. Let's see here, get back to my notes. Yeah, so again, we have a loaded show today. Of course, as per usual, we are high atop Jacksonville, Florida. Beautiful day, by the way. Low 80s. Going to be like that for the next couple days. And then have it on good authority that come next week around Monday, Tuesday, it's going to get cold again. So as they say, when it comes to fall, spring, it can arrive really quickly. It can also disappear really quickly. It can go back to winter pretty quickly. So we're dealing with that here in Jacksonville and surrounding areas. So just be aware that just because it's warm right now doesn't mean it'll be like that forever. Now, eventually we will see that return. Have that on good authority, but at the same time, I can also tell you pretty confidently that we're going to go back into like highs in the 50s, lows in the low 40s, high 30s. So won't be too much longer. Going back to typical, not typical, but back to where we were kind of a few weeks ago. But anyway, if you are new here, this show is college football. May I take no breaks during this time of the year? I know people will say it's the dead period and time to go on vacation, things like that. Look, I don't care if you go on vacation. It's just kind of annoying where everyone does it at the same time, where everyone's shows are all like off the air and there's no like viable, I guess, replacement for shows to watch. But our show's still going on. We're not doing any vacation. We're still trucking around along here. Of course, we talk college football all year round. That's for you. That's our topic that's always on this show. We have a lot of things to discuss here. Big 12 schedule. I'm going to go over that. I got some thoughts on that schedule that was released a month ago, but we're talking about it now. Of course, the toughest schedule overall, toughest stretch, most manageable schedule, and the best game of the Big 12 season. And we're also starting a new series, if you will, a little mini series, or not series, but segment. Reasonable expectations. What are they for Florida State this year? We'll dive into that. We also have some thoughts on this new NCAA vacating wins thing. We'll touch on that a little bit. Then we have another new segment that we're starting. I will probably do this for a while, I think. At least for the time being, is a college football historical what-ifs. What if this happened? What if that happened? What if certain things happen in college football historically, so the past 10 to 15 years? What if all that stuff actually didn't happen the way history remembers it being? So we got all that to cover. Again, if you are new here, we talk college football all year round. Again, they tell you this time there's a dead period. It's not to us. We're full steam ahead. So be sure to subscribe if you like college football. If you're a big Marvel fan, Star Wars fan, even a Tampa Bay Buccaneers fan, that's the only NFL team we cover here. Subscribe to the channel and the podcast feed. Now, tomorrow we will, of course, do our usual extra pod. I think tomorrow. If not, we'll try to do one next week. And so there's no schedule for it. We just kind of do it whenever. Couldn't get to it yesterday, so if you're wondering about that, didn't have one yesterday, couldn't get to it, so hopefully tomorrow we'll get to it. But I expect that tomorrow, maybe in your podcast feeds. So if you're listening on Spotify, just be on the lookout for that. And it's the only place you can get that there is Spotify, Extra Pod. It's more of a Q&A, more relaxed-based version. Well, it's not the same show, it's just a podcast Q&A. That's where we talk more of our non-college football stuff, like Marvel news, some Star Wars news, anything else goes over there. So if you're looking for that, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel as well. Again, X, Twitter, and Instagram. Be sure to subscribe over there as well. When not subscribe, just follow over there. Make sure to do all of that. And just to let you guys know, again, following on the YouTube channel, anywhere, any of our platforms, it's all free. Okay, it's all free of charge. It doesn't cost you anything. It's just a click of a button. Somewhere on YouTube down here, I think, is the subscribe button. And be sure to click that. It doesn't cost you anything. Again, I don't send you guys any forms, emails, spam, calls, anything like that. I don't show up to your house. It's all completely free of charge, and nothing else happens. Just do so. Helps us out in the algorithm. And let's get started here. Still Big 12 schedule, as we've been doing for the past couple weeks now, I think. Go over the just general thoughts on the schedules. Not breaking down every single game. So that's not what we're doing here. We'll do that individually for certain teams starting in May. So the first week of May, or the first time we have a show in the month of May, is when we'll start doing that. But right now, we're just going over, who has the toughest schedule, who has the toughest stretch, who has the most manageable schedule, and what's the best game, right? We're doing this for all major conferences. We're not doing G5 or the new Pac-12 because that's irrelevant to what we're discussing here for the most part. It's not that we're ignoring you. It's just I mean, we'll get to those eventually, but we're not doing that right now. Uh, but yeah, Big 12 schedule. So who has the toughest schedule? I think it's Arizona, the Wildcats of Arizona. I know there's a lot going on in Tucson, not really the college football, but we're just, talking about the college football side of things for Arizona. It's a tough schedule, and it's mainly in the back side of things. And they are also, by the way, spoiler, they also have the toughest stretch as well. So it kind of goes hand in hand here. I know that's kind of cheating, but this really is a tough stretch here. So they finished out the season. It doesn't matter where they are, home or away, with Texas Tech, Texas Christian, Utah, Kansas State, Arizona State. From week 9 all the way to week 13. There's no bye weeks in between that. So it's just straight those games. That's tough. And that says a lot, too, because in the Big 12, and, Josh Pate's been echoing this a lot, and some other folks as well, that the Big 12 is really America's college football conference, where it's very much so randomized. A lot of teams are competing not really above everyone else. They're all on the same level. Even though we've seen, like Texas Tech get a lot of money, and they've kind of, I don't know, like transcended, I guess, the Big 12 in terms of money, talent acquisition. That is true. But in terms of a week-to-week basis, there's not, besides Texas Tech, a no real clear dominant team in the Big 12. And that's why I think a lot of folks attach themselves to the Big 12. That's how a lot of folks like watching them, at least their content in terms of the games. I agree. It's a very fun conference. And to say that Arizona State got the shaft, or not Arizona State, Arizona got the shaft here, Brett Brennan and company, they kind of did. I mean, that is some of the, well, not like the clear favorites again, besides Texas Tech. I mean, like Texas Christian could be a good team next year. Good program historically. Utah, new administration, but it's an administration that is familiar, even with Cunningham moving on. Kansas State hopefully could be better this year with new regime there and Avery Johnson coming back. And you also have Arizona State. So regardless, even if there might be some turmoil at all those programs in certain ways, that's still a difficult schedule to have. Now, the most manageable schedule, again, Arizona has the toughest schedule along with the toughest stretch. I mean, they also, by the way, play BYU and that's the front half of the schedule before their bye week. After the bye week, that's when they play Texas Tech, Texas Christian, Utah, etc. So yeah, the toughest stretch and the toughest schedule is Arizona. Now, the most manageable schedule, I think, is Houston. Now, besides Josh Pate, I have not heard anyone talk about Houston. Now, they could be a legitimate threat to be in contention for the Big 12. Now, you may ask yourself, well, Houston, they're in the G5, right? Well, no, they're not. They're in the Big 12. They've been there for like a number of years now, like 4 years now, I believe. So they've been around. You just haven't heard a lot about them because they have sucked. And they've been one of those, well, not one, but like everyone else in the Big 12 who were formerly in the G5, they've had a really tough time adjusting to the new P4, or I guess bigger conference life, right? They're no longer in the G5. That transitional period was not very, let's just say, kind to them. They've had a lot of turmoil. They bring in Willie Fritz a couple years ago. They have a really good recruiting class that just came in. They have a 5-star quarterback. His name's escaping me. He's a dual threat guy. He should be the starter for them. Their schedule on top of that, all this talent coming in, and along with Willie Fritz, who I respect as a head coach, if you don't remember, he was at Tulane, almost got the Georgia Tech job before Brian Key. A lot of folks think that he got, got screwed over by that. I tend to agree. This team can make some waves here. So they get Oregon State, an FCS team to begin the year. You should be 2-0 in those games. I think you should be. Then it gets real in a hurry with Texas Tech. And I'm assuming a lot of folks are not looking at that game as the best team in the Big 12, but we'll circle back to that. Well, not circle back, but yeah, it is the best game in the Big 12 this year. In my opinion, that's the best one. Texas Tech, Houston. Then they get another G5, and they get UCF, Kansas State, Oklahoma State, Utah, Cincinnati. Before Utah and Cincinnati, it was a bye week. Then it's Cincinnati, Colorado, West Virginia, Baylor. Out of all those games I just mentioned, there's only two or maybe 3 games or dogs in. Texas Tech and Kansas State, Utah. Besides that, they're favored in all those games, in my opinion. And it's going to be tough. There's no doubt it's going to be tough. I mean, it is going to be, with all the expectations that I think will be coming in, it's going to be difficult, no doubt. And I think, are they going road to Georgia Southern? They are. That's okay. Very weird. Very strange. P4 going to the G5. But anyway, go on the road to Georgia Southern, out of the way. Again, that's a workable schedule. Okay, like again, Texas Tech are going to be dogging that game. You're not going to be favored. Kansas State probably not going to be favored in that game. Utah probably not either. But besides that, you should be favored. And that's like what, 9-4, 10-2 potentially, or not 9-4, 9-3, 10-2. So again, I think the most manageable schedule to me is Houston. They got a really good draw there. Then again, the best game, like I just mentioned, is Houston Texas Tech. I think that is very easily could be a preview to the conference championship game. I wouldn't be surprised if we do see it twice. That is a game that just on by itself, without the conference implications and whatnot, just by itself, again, all the talent that Houston's contributed, all the the recruiting, transfer portal, Texas Tech, the big money spender in the Big 12, these two sort of clashing. Good head coaching matchup, by the way, too, with the chess match between Willie Fritz and Joey McGuire. Kind of, but at least two coaches I respect. That's a good game, man. That's a really good game. And any game in the Big 12 could be fun, but that to me, Houston, most manageable schedule. And they also happen to be involved with the best game of the season, which is Houston Texas Tech. And it's early in the year, too. So both of these teams should be I don't think we'll be dealing with any big injury concerns, any losses. I doubt it. I think both of these teams should be undefeated when they face each other. So again, as a recap, toughest schedule, Arizona. Toughest stretch, Arizona. Again, I feel so bad for you folks and Tucson, both for on the field, related to college football and non-related. If you know, you know. It just happens to be your football team got screwed over with the toughest stretch and, by definition, the toughest schedule in the Big 12. Houston, though, did get a very manageable draw. And the best game is Houston Texas Tech. I think that is going to be an amazing game early on in the year. Very, very underrated game. I've seen no one talk about that game. Even Josh Pate, who's talked a little about Houston. I've not heard anyone talk about Texas Tech and Houston being the best game in the Big 12 next year. In my opinion, early on, I was looking at things way too early. That is going to be the best game of the year, I think, the Big 12. Very much so. Underrated, for sure. So I'm going to get some water real quick. We're 12 minutes into the show, so we can do that. We'll get some water real quick. We'll move on to Florida State. Then we'll go on to some of the other topics and wrap up the show. Probably won't be a whole hour show, similar to last year, around 30 minutes or so, which is per usual on this time. We ever did this last year, too. We did shows around less than 40 minutes. We don't get those during the season, though. Those things can be well up to an hour, so enjoy it while you want to, or, I guess enjoy it while you can. But I have a good authority. We'll have some hour-long shows here pretty soon. Once we start getting the spring football and spring intel, those will be a little bit longer. Florida State. What are reasonable expectations for Florida State? What are they? What would be reasonable for Florida State fans in 2026? What would it be? You've come off back-to-back losing seasons, a couple years removed after the snub. You had what happened in 2024. It just exists for what it is. 2025 starts out really, really good. It's sort of a false hope, kind of like we just talked about earlier with the false spring that we're dealing with here in northeastern Florida, southeastern Georgia. It wasn't supposed to tie in, but it kind of is. That's what last year felt like for Florida State. Florida State felt like a false spring, right? You have the grueling months of winter. You get to where we are right now, currently, as I'm recording this, and we're live on YouTube, to where we are in the deep south, dealing with a false spring, right? Everything's really warm. Temperatures are in the 70s or low 80s, or in some cases for us in Florida, like in Orlando, near 90. But then harsh reality comes in the form of next week when a cold front comes in and temperatures go back down to, the 50s and low 60s. So back to typical winter weather, right? That was Florida State last year. Florida State before the Pitt game was basically like a false spring. It feels good. Everything's going well. You're undefeated, top 10 in the country. Everyone's saying, oh, this team is going to be in Charlotte in December to play for the conference title. And then, well, we'll do it again. The snap, just like that, it's all gone. It's like a miracle. It goes away after the loss to Pitt. Well, I guess technically the Virginia game was the start of it, but really the Pitt game. So as I pop paper here, the last time Florida State had back-to-back winning seasons was 2023 and 2024. Okay, so that was 10-3, 13-1. They have now had back-to-back losing seasons consecutively. I believe for like, what is it, this now, like 3 times, I believe now. So it was during the Willie Tiger years. Then you have Mike Norvell, first 2 years. Then you have Mike Norvell recently. So how about that? The first, last 2-3 times Florida State's had losing back-to-back losing seasons is within the last 7 years, right? 7 to 5 years. They've had losing seasons. So where Florida State is right now. Of course, you just had major turnover, and Mike Norvell survives last year. He's back. He survives whatever possible regime change was going to happen. Florida State officials and money people say, we could make a change, but let's wait and deal with it when the buyout goes down, which I think is probably smart to do, right? But then you have, the transfer portal, recruiting, not really, kind of a lame duck situation there. No real surprises there. You lose Malzahn, or if you think about it, Malzahn does you a favor, retires, you guys promote from within, you don't have to hire anyone, you don't have to get someone a new contract and owe you more money. So everything is shaping up for 2026 to be basically let's get this shit over with, let's move on and go get someone else in the next hiring cycle. That's what it feels like to me. But we're not here to talk about, the doom and gloom and woe is me, Florida State. Let's talk about regional expectations. Kind of the same thing, but I guess if you look at it, right, Florida State, if you want to go reasonable here, not go too negative or even too positive, I think 6-6, 7-5 is what you're looking for, right? That's kind of what you're thinking about last year, right? The whole thing was after 2024 was, okay, we can't go much worse, right? We can only get better from here. You guys got better, right? You went 5-7. So in general, if you just take away the brand of Florida State, going from 2-10 to 5-7, that's a good improvement. That's like 3 wins improvement. But that's good for Kent State, not Florida State, right? So if you look at the schedule for Florida State as we take a look here, FSU football, I believe the schedule should be, we just talked about those here today, but it should be available on the old wiki page. Yeah. So you get New Mexico State, SMU, go on the road to Bama, FCS team. So, you have a pretty tough draw, actually, I think now. I'm looking at it, right? You have Louisville, Miami, Clemson, basically back-to-back. It's a very tough stretch there in late October, right? Mid-October, late October. But I think even you look at the schedule, the coordinator change, bring in Ashton Daniels, he's over from Auburn, before that, fellow ACC school, Stanford. I think that's the mark there, is to get to a bowl game. And to hope that certain portions of the fan base and the apparatus of Florida State just say, you know what? We went 7-5, 8-4. Let's bring back Mike Norvell one more time, and let's just see what happens after that. If it's worse, then we'll fire him. If it gets better, then we'll keep him. That's best case scenario, or at least a general reasonable scenario for Florida State, is that they go just make it to a bowl game, right? And, keep things status quo, and maybe you get better in recruiting. But here's the thing. Even though we can go, somewhat neutral on feelings about Florida State and what is reasonable for them, it's not good enough for Florida State. Is 7-5 good enough for that brand, for that Chief Osceola's face? Is it good enough for, the past players, Deion Sanders, Jameis Winston, is that the standard there? I don't think so. And I wonder, even if you guys go 7-5, even if you guys go 8-4, do the folks, and again, I don't have much joy in saying this. I don't really like talking about people's jobs being on the line and saying, oh, this person and that person needs to be fired. I'll talk about when it's appropriate. I'll use the term regime change when it's appropriate, right? I did it for example, during last season, when it was appropriate for Brian Kelly, when it was appropriate for Hugh Freeze, when it was appropriate for certain coaches, when the time was appropriate. I'm not going to just blatantly say, oh, this guy needs to be fired all the way in, April or May or whatever. We'll just see what the season holds out. But the feeling is, though, just on broad strokes purposes, or what some people say perpi, supposedly the plural purpose, that's debatable. I don't know if that's like I don't know if Florida State fans accept that, going 7-5, 8-4, and I wonder, even if that happens, who's to say if Florida State's president just says, you know what, Mike Norvell, you're out. Mike Alford, you're also out. And that's another thing no one's talking about outside of Florida State circles, is Mike Alford is definitely on the block too. So if it's Mike Norvell going away, it's both Mikes, right? Mike Alford and Norvell are definitely out. If you don't know what I'm talking about, Alford, it's not. It has to do with him extending Mike Norvell, and yes, that is a part of it, obviously. But his attitude towards NIL has rubbed a lot of folks, the wrong way. Bud Elliott of Cover 3, and he also has his own Florida State podcast, which is on pause currently because of how bad the program is. He's made it very clear that a lot of Florida State fans do not like both Mikes, Mike Norvell and Alford. So even in the most reasonable scenario, they go 6-6, 7-5, 8-4 or better. They could still, the president there, if he really wants to, which, given what we heard from last season or back last fall, seems like they were willing to do so if the funding was there or the opportunity was, in front of them. They were going to make a change, but they didn't because they wanted the buyout to go down. So again, even in the most reasonable scenario, Mike Norvell and Michael Alford, the AD, are probably out. So you're probably going to have a coaching change. And, at that point, we can talk about the candidates when it's time's appropriate. But as of right now, again, I'm not calling for Mike Norvell to get fired. I'm not saying there needs to be a regime change immediately. It's just, let's just see how this plays out. Look, you guys can go, who knows, maybe you guys can go 9-3 or better. If that happens, then maybe you do keep Mike Norvell around. You just say, okay, let's do this again next year. But then again, the detractor of Florida State fans will say, well, we've done that before with the portal cannon. It worked a few times. It's worked a few times in a negative sense where it didn't work. So who knows? Look, again, you bring in Ashton Daniels. I'm assuming even with the coordinator change of Malzahn retiring, you're still going to run the Malzahn stuff. It's not that different from Norvell, but it is in some cases different. You still have the personnel to run it. So I don't know. Again, the schedule, you have Bama, you have Louisville, you have Miami, you have Clemson, and you have UF at home. That's kind of your season in a sense. At least that's your big games. But it's not just that for Florida State and their schedule. It's the SMU game. It's the Virginia game. It's the game at Pitt, the game at Boston College. You can lose the other games in a sense. You can lose to Clemson. You can lose to Miami. You can lose to Bama. But you can't lose to Virginia. Or at least in terms of from a vibes perspective, losing to Virginia, Boston College, Pitt, NC State, like you did last year to a certain extent, that's no bueno, and that's easily get you fired. So, again, most reasonable expectation for Florida State, even with the backdrop of the whole possibility of regime change and, a whole coaching search happening next fall. Just make it to a bowl game, right? Get some positivity going, even if it means you're going to have to get a new coach in there. At least there's something to look for, or at least there's something that tells you that the program's at least trending in the better direction, right? So, Florida State's a tough thing to figure out, man. It's really is tough, but it's also pretty simple, too. And it hurts me, too, because Florida State's one of those schools, and look, if you're new here, I don't particularly have a team that I cheer for, like necessarily a team that I'm close with in college football. I just like college football in general. Yeah, I grew up with people who have vested interest in, like Auburn, for example, but if there is a team who I follow and sort of a program that I wish was a little bit better than they have been, it's probably Florida State. If I had to choose, a team in the state of Florida, probably Florida State. UF could be in there as well, but I've always had a soft spot for Florida State. Interesting fan base, interesting program. So I don't know. It kind of pains me to see Florida State struggle like this and have them, go from the highest of highs and going 13-0 and regular ACC champs to all of a sudden having back-to-back historically bad losing seasons. So it brings me no joy to talk about regime change and monumental changes to the program. But they have to happen probably, and they're probably going to happen. Again, it's not a guarantee, but definitely the trends are going in that direction. Okay, but it's some more water real quick, and we'll talk about this whole NCAA vacating a wins thing. And then we'll talk about historical what-ifs for college football. That should be a fun segment. I think that one could be one of our best new segments that we'll be adding on here or keeping on here for the time being. Again, if you are new here, welcome into the show. Again, we talk college football all year round. Fix a microphone here on Spotify. Yeah, we talk about college football all year round here on this show. If you're new here, first of all, welcome in and thank you for joining us. Again, be sure to subscribe to the channel. Somewhere down there's a subscribe button. Click it. Nothing happens to you. There's no money. I don't want your credit card or want to check. Just subscribe to the channel. It's all free. Nothing happens. Again, social media feeds, they should be in the channel descriptions. Just click on our channel. There should be links there to our social media platforms and Spotify too. If you're listening on Spotify, subscribe to the podcast feed. Okay, but yeah, we talk college football all year round here. We talk about that. We have other adventures as well. Marvel, Star Wars is a big fan of those properties. We talk about those sometimes on the main show. We've sort of made some changes after the new year to where those are now on the Four Verticals Extra Pod, which we do every so often. Maybe we'll go on out tomorrow. We'll see, time permitting, but at least on my schedule. But yeah, I mean, we talk college football all year around here. That's the one thing that'll always be here is college football. We always talk about a lot of things to discuss for sure. So again, it's important, especially around this time of the year. But I tell you, it's a dead period. We're still going full steam ahead. So again, it's very crucial to subscribe. Let's see here. Okay, yeah, this is the next one. So there was this story. I believe it came from, let me go to my Twitter here, X account here to see. I believe it is, and no, it's not. We're not talking about the whole Georgia, driving thing. That's been in the news, and there's some new stuff of that. Honestly, I'm getting sick of it. I don't really care. Who really gives a shit? Really? I mean, I don't care. It's out there if you want to talk about it, but at this point, it's like, cool, I got water for my fridge today. Congratulations. Okay, so this is what I did want to talk about. So Ross Dellinger put out, and this is via On3 Sports, that the NCAA is apparently threatening to vacate wins, erase stats, and fine schools if it wins its ongoing eligibility lawsuits. Some of this has to deal with certain players wanting more eligibility. And this does, in fact, or at least it does impact a couple of certain schools, in particular a couple of G5s, and more importantly, Lewis Moore, who is a player from Indiana. So this would, I guess, sort of impact their national title thing. Here's what I'll say here to this whole thing. And I'm not here to smear on Ross Dellinger. This is clearly real, and obviously this is a real thing. Does this impact me, or should this impact, let's just use Indiana here. No disrespect to, San Diego State or Memphis, but how does this impact Indiana, right? Because this ties into them. I believe Lewis Moore, I believe that's who that player was, right? Yeah, Lewis Moore. I believe he was there for the national title team. Let me double check. I did this earlier. Let's see here. Lewis Moore. Let's see here. I believe he was. Yeah, he won the national championship, and he's still there. He was at Indiana for a few years, and he transferred to Ole Miss, and he went back. So there's that. And then before that, he was at a community college, I believe, or something like that. Anyway, so he's fighting for eligibility because of the whole, I think, the JC thing, and because, was that Navarro? Yeah, junior college. So yeah, that's what the whole thing is. Anyway, so yeah, the NCAA is running to vacate wins because of that certain player was on that certain team. So this does impact, I guess, Ole Miss and Indiana. How should fans, particularly if Indiana fans, how should you feel about that? Should you feel threatened? Should you feel nervous about your, national title being revoked or wins being vacated? My opinion is no. You should not be worried about it. Even if it does happen, right? We've seen this before with the NCAA, where they'll vacate wins, whether it's with the Les Miles stuff at LSU or other, scandals that were not as serious. Mind you, like the whole Penn State thing, the Baylor situation, or even the SMU stuff back in the 80s. Lesser, violations, right? Teams will get penalized for the vacate wins. So if you're Indiana, should you be afraid of that? I don't think so. Even if they do vacate wins, let's just say worst case scenario, they vacate some wins here, and it impacts your national title season. Like others have said, they're not, just because you vacate wins or the NCAA vacates some wins and they, someone goes and edits your Wikipedia page, just because that happens doesn't mean the memories of you watching that team, let's just say if it is Indiana, they do get wins vacated. Just because you have those wins vacated doesn't mean you lose the memories of those games. Doesn't mean that stuff gets erased from history. It's not like the NCAA is going to do go full FBI and erase any traces of you winning the national title. No, that's not going to happen. You still remember that. You still have memories of you watching along with, I guess, friends and family, watching your Indiana Hoosiers beat Miami in Miami in their home stadium, literally, for the national title. Just because any organization or anyone vacates your wins does not erase their memories of them. That shouldn't take anything of that. Okay, and To be fair, I don't even know if this is even going to happen. It seems very unlikely this will really happen, at least to the extent it will happen. I think this will be. I think this will get settled. I don't really suspect there'll be any vacated wins here. I don't really think that will happen. But who knows? It could. Again, even if it does, it shouldn't impact you really. Again, like what? The NCAA's going to go and you know do Outlaw Doctor Strange and Spider-Man No Way Home and erase your memory of Indiana winning the national title? No, that's not going to happen. Yeah, your Wikipedia page may change. Yeah, some ones they get vacated, but you'll still have those memories. You'll still be able to go on YouTube and find the highlight reels and whatnot. So no, that shouldn't impact you. It's kind of ridiculous still seeing even today having folks freak out about, oh no, they're going to strip Indiana's national title, and just like a few years ago, oh no, we're going to strip Michigan's national title because of the whole sign stealing thing. It's like, guys, just because you vacate some wins and again your Wikipedia page changes, your memories are still there. You're not going to lose those unless you have, amnesia, and God bless your heart if you do. But it's just that's not your memories are not going to go away. Okay, you're not going to erase your memory of your favorite team having success just because some stuff happened off the field to where you have to vacate wins. It's stupid to vacate wins. Again, it's not like you're gonna ignore it happened or you're not gonna have your memories taken away. But I don't know. It's a very weird thing. I kind of wish the NCAA would just stop doing this. I doubt this will actually happen. Even if it does happen, it's still stupid either way. Because again, it's like are you gonna seriously vacate wins? You're acting like it's gonna erase people's memories of that happening, of teams having success. I don't know. I've always thought that was really stupid and not really beneficial to the realm of college football because there's so many other things that come up in college football, at least issues in the sport, like with conference expansion, the way NIL is working, the transfer portal, the calendar, for example. But then you have the NCAA worrying about eligibility and vacating wins and this and that and the other and all over creation. It's just there are more pressing things to worry about in college football, particularly the schedule, the calendar more specifically. But the NCAA couldn't bat an eye. They couldn't lift a finger. They couldn't care, although they probably should. Anyway, here, one more reminder here, too. Again, subscribe to the channel. As per usual, again, it helps us out, gets us in the algorithm. Again, we're not the best show, but we're certainly one of the more newer shows out there, and we're growing ever so slightly, but I think someday we will be pretty big, I think. It takes some time, but I think the more and more we're doing this, the more and more I think we're having really good shows. I mean, this one's going pretty well so far. But again, be sure to subscribe to the podcast feed, YouTube channel, follow us on the socials. Again, we do this show twice a week if you're new here. Tuesdays and Thursdays again. Fridays or Wednesdays we'll have an extra pod. Hopefully we'll get one cranked out tomorrow. I think we may be able to. We'll see. If not, we'll do one in the future for sure. There's no really set schedule. It's just, more randomized. But again, subscribe. That's if you take away anything from this show, that's one of the things, along with the topics we're talking about. Okay. Last up here, college football what-ifs, historical what-ifs. New thing we're starting up here, and this is something I've thought about doing for a long time, but why not do it now? It's the calendar says February 19th. People will say it's the O word, off season. We don't use that term here along with other shows, but people will say it's a dead period or taking vacations or you're doing less shows. We can do that. We're not subtracting shows. Just because the calendar says February doesn't mean we're not doing 2 shows a week unless it's for a reasonable reason, whether it's a scheduling issue. But most of the time, you will be seeing us doing 2 shows a week. And therefore, we have the constitutional right to talk about college football historical what-ifs. Nice little, jogging down memory lane. So we have a couple of them here. We have 4. We'll do a few more of these going forward for, I guess, until the season starts probably, until we run out of ideas. But we'll see how long this goes here. So first one up here, what if the Pac-10 added OU and Texas plus other teams? This happened, I believe, circa 2011, 2010. I don't remember this too much because I was a little bit younger back then, but I remember hearing about some sort of realignment, like A&M was involved, I believe, in Colorado. This, of course, turned into the conference expansion we eventually saw with the SEC adding in, eventually, of course, A&M and Missouri, but, of course, Texas and OU down the road. So, of course, the thing here is what if, this ended up happening, right? Because the reason why it didn't happen was because the whole Longhorn Network thing and there was some TV disputes going on. So it didn't happen, and the Pac-12 ended up adding in some of the Mountain West teams and teams from other conferences instead of OU and Texas. If this happened, though, if the Pac-10 added OU, Texas plus, a few of the other Big 12 teams. I think the Pac-12 sticks around. It doesn't go away because they have those bigger brands. Now, grant you, it still went away anyway with Oregon, USC, and some of the others. But if you add OU and Texas in addition to those programs, instead of the other way around, where those teams or those universities went to a different conference, to a different, bigger league, then yeah, I think if this scenario happened, the Pac-12 is still around, still with us. Now, the other butterfly effect here is what happens to Big 12? Where do they go? Do they sort of go into where they are right now, where they add in these former G5 teams like a UCF, like a Texas State, or maybe they're the ones who grab TCU. Well, eventually I guess they would, but what if they grabbed up, Central Florida, South Florida, right? Houston, Tulsa, teams like that who were, I think, wasn't Tulsa really good in 2010 or around that time? Man, they had like a 10-win season, I think. Surprisingly, folks remember that. So, yeah, interesting to see not only seeing the Pac-12 sustain itself and have even more bigger brands in addition to the brands it had already, but also what happens to the Big 12, right? What happens to the Big 12 in this alternate universe if the Pac-12 gobbles up them, OU, Texas, and among others? Does the Big 12 go away the Pac-12? I don't know. Probably does, or it kind of becomes a version of what we have it right now, where it's like a very zombified version. But yeah, very interesting. That's a very fascinating what if. I don't see a lot of folks bring that up that often. But this next one, this is a deep cut, even before I was born, and I learned about this like back when I was in high school, which was like 8 to 9 years ago. What if Ronald Curry, yes, Ronald Curry of North Carolina, what if he committed to UVA, Virginia? If you guys don't remember, there's a video from, I believe, Christian the Oracle, KTO. He does a lot of NFL, college football content. By the way, subscribe to him too. He's really good. But he did a video on this about Ronald Curry, and he was, if you want the short synopsis here, he was a 5-star recruit back in their late 90s, early 2000s. And he and Michael Vick were the two best quarterbacks at that time, right? And they were both, the goal was, or at least the hope was among fans, was to have, of course, Michael Vick goes to Virginia Tech, but then you would have had Ronald Curry, this other dual threat 5-star QB who also had to be really good in basketball, would have gone to UVA, and that would have been really interesting to see him, Michael Vick, those two teams, Virginia and Virginia Tech, in that big rivalry game at the end of the year, the Commonwealth rivalry. That would have been so cool, man, to see just if you were to go back, if I was alive back then, if I was able to actually, I was old enough to watch, wouldn't it be amazing to see those two guys go at it? And, the amount of, I guess, content from that era, the two going at each other, not literally, but their teams going at each other in those rivalry games, and what would have looked like from the old games and maybe even some notable games from that era. This would have been incredible. Now, it didn't happen. Of course, he ends up going to UNC for basketball reasons, and he ends up going to plays at UNC for football. It did okay. There's that one, was it Chick-fil-A Bowl versus Auburn? He had a huge game, but didn't really pan out in the NFL. I don't think so. He's still a coach. He's actually still doing some stuff. I believe he was with the Bills coaching staff in the NFL. Now he's with Sean Payton in Denver. So, yeah, interesting. If he actually committed to UVA, we would have gotten Ronald Curry, if he actually lived to his potential, versus Michael Vick in college football. Absolute cinema, in the words of Martin Scorsese. So that's an interesting what if. Also, I guess the other butterfly effect here is what happens to UNC. What they do at quarterback? I wasn't around in the late 90s, early 2000s, so I don't know necessarily what the quarterback market was for recruiting. Speaking of quarterback, this next one, what if Cam Newton, before he goes to Blinn College and then he goes to Auburn and has a great NFL, well, not great, but a good NFL career, what if he never leaves UF? What if he just stays behind? Again, this is pre-transfer portal, mind you. This is before the art of transferring was a thing. You can still transfer, but you have to sit out a year. What if Cam just sat behind Tim Tebow, stayed there? I think a lot of things would have happened. A, Auburn doesn't win the national title. That's one. And Gene Chizik never has success at Auburn, so therefore he probably gets fired right around probably the same time in 2012. So that timeline, actually, to a certain extent, doesn't change a whole lot besides 2010. So in 2010, you probably see Auburn go 7-5, 8-4. I guess maybe a little bit better, maybe 9-3 if they go after someone else. But generally, the timeline of Auburn, besides if you exclude 2010, which is a big pillar, does not change all that much. You still probably fire Gene Chizik, and maybe you bring in Gus Malzahn eventually. But at least, or maybe he comes in anyway. But yeah, so the Florida thing is really fascinating here. So if he stays at Florida, doesn't have the laptop thing, and he ends up getting dismissed from the team, I think Urban Meyer stays out Florida way longer. And if you remember, when Tim Tebow leaves, the next guy in succession was a guy named John Brantley. And I remember this because I remember this directly. I was still young back in 2010, but I still was watching college football a lot. That's when I started to kind of get into it a little bit. But if you go back to a couple years ago, it was a clip of Colin Cowherd that resurfaced a few years ago. It was for actually a different video. It was like a video about Boise State, and it was it was a clip of Colin back when he was at ESPN doing his radio show, and it was him saying he was discussing Boise State. And he was talking about them in the preseason, and I believe that year they were what was it, top 3 in 2010, and this is the year people thought they couldn't make a run to the national title, and they ended up losing to Nevada in the final weekend of the season. But anyway, so Kyle Hurd was talking about Boise State getting a vote or getting number 1 overall votes, and he was saying, I think his quote was, "Give me an AP vote, put them at 14th, 15th, and I would take Florida's team over them, whatnot." And of course, he brings up John Brantley, the quarterback there. And for those of you who remember, or have not done your research, if you're someone like me who wasn't, sort of half in, half out, paying attention to college football back then, may recall that Florida really struggled that year. They went from preseason top 10 to going 7-6, I believe, or 6-6 in regular season. They were terrible, and they had no replacement for Tim Tebow. The drop off from him to John Brantley, or I think at that point I believe actually Jacoby Brissett, before he went to NC State, he was at Florida for a couple years. It was a horrible drop off. And then, of course, Urban Meyer retires or resigns. If Tim Tebow, not Tim Tebow, if he stayed behind, that would not happen because he ran out of eligibility. But what I was going to say, Cam Newton, yes. So if Cam Newton does not get dismissed from Florida, he stays at UF, that transitional period from him being Tim Tebow to Cam Newton would have been so more seamless than what it was from Tim Tebow to John Brantley. I think Florida probably ends up back in the SEC championship game and maybe is like a win away from the national title. I don't think they beat Alabama or LSU or whoever would have come out of the West, because remember, kids, back then, the SEC was still in divisions. I know that was only a few years ago when they went away from that. But yeah, so Florida, you guys remember 2010 it was South Carolina, and of course they beat Florida, and they had again quarterback John Brantley or whoever that was at that point. I think they got benched multiple times, but yeah, I mean, if Cam was a quarterback there from Florida in 2010, yeah, they would have probably won the SEC East. They would have gone to Atlanta instead of South Carolina, that shitty South Carolina team, which is called what it is. They would have probably lost maybe to LSU, maybe to Alabama, or whomever, maybe Arkansas, maybe. So, I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll see. Maybe who knows? They would have won the whole national title. Who knows? Maybe Cam Newton was just really that good. I think he is that good, but I don't know. That's really tough to really think about. But, it's interesting to think about for sure. And I definitely believe that UF, that transition from Tim Tebow to Cam Newton, actually scratching it. They probably would have won the national title. What I'm talking about. They probably would have. And talk about a transition. And that was just incredible to think about. Have you ever seen that in college football? A transition like that from one guy winning a Heisman to potentially another guy who won a Heisman? At least in that succession, I guess. Kyler Murray from Baker Mayfield, I guess, is the other comp to that. So, yeah, what I'm talking about. Yeah, I should know that. Yes, I guess we sort of seen that. I guess or at least we've already seen a version of that. Yeah. I guess Baker Mayfield to Kyler Murray to Jalen Hurts. Yeah. But I don't know. I guess in that stature, I guess we've seen it a little bit, but to see that in the early 2010s would have been incredible to watch. So, yeah, if Cam Newton never left Florida, huge butterfly effect. Not just Auburn, obviously, but UF, too, that transitional period after Tim Tebow. And then finally, last one here, we'll wrap up. What if Ohio State had not destroyed Wisconsin in that 2014 Big Ten title game? So if you don't remember, in 2014, of course, this is the first year to 14 playoff and the first controversy of among many. Of course, is the year the Big 12 gets left out. Both Baylor and Texas Christian get left out, both from one-loss teams. Texas Christian going to that final championship weekend, they were number 3. This was back when the Big 12 had no conference championship. Their final regular season games were still being played in conference championship weekends. And I think they had like 2 byes or something like that, or 2 bye weeks or some weird scheduling quirk. So, yeah. So TCU that weekend, I think they played Iowa State and they blew them out. And then Baylor played Kansas State. It was like a top 15 matchup. They won that game. So then, of course, you had Ohio State destroy Wisconsin. That Wisconsin team had Melvin Gordon. And they blew him out 59-0. Of course, this was Cardale Jones' first start. So in the current timeline, if you want to look at it that way, Ohio State destroys Wisconsin, goes to make college football playoff and win a national championship. What if they don't destroy Wisconsin? What if that game's more competitive? What if Melvin Gordon, what if they actually lose the game? What if Melvin Gordon has a good game, he's not injured or whatever heck was going on there with him? He's not injured, he doesn't have any injury concerns, he's full strength, and they end up winning the game or making it close. What happens to Ohio State? Did they get left out? Does TCU get left in? Did they stay number 3? Does Baylor leapfrog TCU and Ohio State's the outside looking in? Fascinating thing. It's not like a major butterfly effect, but it would have given TCU their first opportunity to make the college football playoff almost 10 years before they would have made it with St. Dykes in 2022. So, yeah, very interesting there to see what would have happened there if they would have actually, made it in. And what would have TCU done? Would they have actually won the national title? I believe that was Trevon Boykin, that team. And, of course, now he's had legal issues, but, is what it is. But, yeah, that's very fascinating to see what would have happened there. I kind of believe that TCU would have at least made the national title. I don't know if they would have won it. I don't know if they would have beaten Oregon or beaten Bama. They would have gone there, but who knows? I do believe they would have beaten Florida State, I think. But I can't necessarily say confidently that wouldn't be the case, but who knows? And that's the show. Just a little bit under 50 minutes here, 4 minutes short. So, again, don't look out tomorrow for an extra pod. We'll see if we can get it out. Not a guarantee, but we'll try to get it out at some point tomorrow. If we don't, then just have to wait until next week. And it's not a set schedule. We just kind of do it whenever. But, yes, that's the show. Again, we're back on Tuesday for sure, and Thursday, usual schedule, around the same time. So, until then, again, be on the lookout for your podcast feed on Spotify for an extra pod. We'll see. More likely we should crank right now. There's a lot of things to discuss, particularly with that Mandalorian Grogu trailer. A lot of thoughts there. So, again, until for the main show, the show here on YouTube and Spotify. Until Tuesday, enjoy your weekend and enjoy college basketball, whatever you're doing. Take care, and we'll see you guys on the next stream.